Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 5 Strategies for Maximizing Talent in an Economic Downturn. Thanks for attending. My name is Brian Schill, and I'm the Executive Director for the Peters Township Chamber. Today's presentation is sponsored and presented by Emily Melius of Launch Consulting. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here.
Good, good. Little Zoom 101. This will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel. So it'll always be there for your viewing pleasure. And one other thing, if you have a question, please use the Q&A button. Again, the Q&A button rather than the chat button. And Emily would be happy to answer those for you. And at this point, Emily, take it away.
Well, thank you. And I will try to keep an eye on the Q&A chat. And I gave Brian and Kelly the go-ahead to interrupt me as we're talking. If you have a question, I'd love to address it on the spot. There also will be time at the end to talk through your questions, but I love conversations rather than a lecture. So I invite you to please feel free to let me know when something comes up. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm really excited to talk about these strategies. Let me pull up my screen here so we can all be seeing the same thing. Okay, there we go. So as Brian said, this is the 5 strategies to maximize talent in tough times. It's been a tough time. It's been a tough year. And I actually wrote this. It was originally an ebook that this presentation has come out of. I wrote it back in March when everything felt like it was in some ways crumbling down around us. And in the tough times, those are actually the times that we need every single effort to count. We don't have time or money for inefficiencies or for people to be working on the wrong things. But that's also the hardest time to make that happen. So you might be able to identify very well with what I'm saying in this. So all of these 5 strategies were created with the thought of them being simple to implement, practical, immediately actionable, and very little to no money. Again, in tough times, that's the kind of stuff we need. We need quick, we need high impact, and we need not a lot of resources. So let me overview for you what these 5 strategies are, and then we're going to spend our time drilling down deeper. First is increase the frequency of your engagement survey. If you don't have an engagement survey, if you don't even know what an engagement survey is, no worries. We're going to talk through why you need one, what it is, what it's doing for you, and why it's really important, if you do have an engagement survey, to issue that more frequently. Second, reassess job descriptions. I find that these are living, breathing things, and with a big event that we've had like COVID has really impacted what people are doing on a daily basis. And it might not look the same as it has a year ago, but if we're operating under these old expectations, that really sets people up for failure and also inefficiency. So we go right back to that wasted effort issue. Third, perform an efficiency analysis for each employee. This is a process that we do for our clients. I'm going to talk you through the high-level thinking here, the framework here, but it's a way using data and assessments to really pinpoint where people are pushing and pulling themselves in order to perform their jobs. And we don't want that because that's where we get inefficiencies and it costs us time and money. Fourth, revise your performance review process. These all really work together. You'll see themes here, but there's the pre-COVID and there's the post-COVID. And if we're operating out of expectations of what was possible before now, and some of you might be in businesses that were unaffected, and some of you might be in businesses that have actually done better as a result of COVID. But regardless, these are things that need to be looked at regularly, at least annually, and especially when we have big events that have frankly changed the game. And lastly, rethink your hiring strategy. Whether you are currently hiring, you're on a hiring freeze, whether you're growing gangbusters and can't hire fast enough, really, no matter where you are in terms of growing and hiring, you should have a hiring strategy. And if you think, gosh, we're not hiring now and I don't even know when we will, maybe we're even contracting, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a hiring strategy. You definitely still want to be thinking about, what do we have in terms of talent? Where are the gaps? And how can we be poised and ready to take full advantage of the opportunity when it presents itself? So a little bit more about me. If you don't know me, I think I know some of the folks on this call, some I don't. Feel free to reach out after today. I'd love to hear more about you and the work that you do. I'm the CEO of Launch Consulting. I started Launch Consulting back in 2007, so I've been coaching and consulting for 14 years now. And my passion is to help organizations like yours increase engagement, productivity, and profits by creating fulfilling work. I'm a firm believer that fulfilled employees are top performers. And not only is that a belief of mine, but we have some incredible research to back that up. And while that may feel like a wonderful aim, but maybe a little bit of unicorns and butterflies, I can promise you it's good for business. And I'm happy to have a separate conversation about that. So my qualifications, I'm a SHRM SCP. That's the highest level designation in HR, if you're not familiar with that. And I'm also a certified Kolbe consultant. I'll be sharing with you today about some of the capabilities that we have and tools that we have. One of them being the Kolbe system, which is a set of assessments that are really unlike any others. So that's, again, something that I've been trained in for 14 years now and had exposure to for, gosh, maybe 25 years. So let's get right into it. Strategy 1, increase the frequency of your engagement survey. Let's back up. If you're familiar with an engagement survey or not, let's just address, what is it? And I find some organizations are doing it because their HR department said it's a good thing to do, or they heard somewhere along the way that it's a good thing to do, or maybe they have an HRIS system or another system that they bought maybe for payroll, and it tacked on this engagement survey piece, so they use it. But sometimes these words like engagement, again, sound a little fluffy, sound a little nice, but no one really knows what it means or what the business purpose is. So I like to talk about engagement as the difference between who's on the bench and who's in the game. You can have all the talent and skills in the world, but if they're on the bench, your business is losing. So engagement is something that's always in flux. It's not a constant. It's not a one-time metric. It's really a snapshot in time, which is why we'll talk about you have to measure it frequently. But this is going to really give you the pulse of your organization, of where your employees are. We can drill down granular even to departments and teams and help you see where effort is being put forth and where effort's being held back. So if you're already using an engagement survey, or maybe you've heard of them, a lot of times the common practice is to do something once a year. And what happens in those instances is organizations, again, will have some kind of platform, and maybe they're not even calling it an engagement survey, but once a year they send out this long questionnaire to everyone in the company and ask them about, are you happy with your work? Do you like your leadership? Things like, what's culture? What's your job? What's working? What's not? And the problem is, because it happens once a year, it's an autopsy, not a wellness check. So you get information 11 months later about something that happened way back when, and you can do nothing about it. You might learn why you have a dead body, but you can't change the outcome. So that's an issue when it's not frequent enough. And the other issue is when it's not frequent enough, when you're not checking in with employees on a regular basis, then when you do, it feels like the SATs. You have to ask so many questions of them. And usually, my husband has one of these that's given annually in his organization. And I think it takes him 45 to 50 minutes. And what we found in research, and if you think of your own situation, once you pass the 10-minute mark, once you try to ask people, and Brian and Kelly might understand this too from just surveys that they send out from the chamber, if it goes beyond 10 minutes, people start looking ahead and they say, okay, I just need to get through this. And so they don't answer as honestly. They're just kind of checking the boxes so they can get through it. So you're not even getting the benefit of all that extra insight or information. The other thing I'll ask you, as you can see here, is what would happen if you only asked your significant other how they feel once a year? I have a feeling they wouldn't like you very much. That wouldn't be a strong relationship, right? So sometimes we really bifurcate personal relationships and professional relationships, and on some level that's a good thing, but a lot of the core principles apply. And I really like thinking about your organization as having a relationship, which it does, with the people in the organization. And all healthy relationships require trust, which comes from delivering on promises, doing what you say you're going to do, also genuine interest in the other person, and two-way communication. So think of the signal that is being put off if you're not actually asking the people that you lead, the people in your organization on a regular basis, how they feel. Or if it only comes once a year, how do you think that comes off to them? Do you really think you're displaying genuine interest? And if there's never two-way communication, if they don't have an opportunity to share how they're feeling with you versus the reverse, that's frustrating for them. And it doesn't mean they're not talking. They're just talking to each other and sometimes grumbling to each other. So you really want to hear things and catch things before they become large cultural issues. And then it's just that trust. When you ask for how they're feeling, and then the platform that we use that I'll talk to you about gives you ways to act on that and stay accountable to that. So then employees feel more open and willing to be more honest about what issues they're dealing with, because they know that you take that seriously and that you're going to do something about it. So it's really honestly just the fundamentals of good relationships. So let's talk about the what, why, and how of engagement surveys. What we recommend, and I'm going to show you a couple of snapshots from something called Engagement Multiplier. We are a partner with them. That means that we can support you if it's a tool that you wish to use at whatever level you want. You can also just do a DIY approach. The reason why I like Engagement Multiplier so much is because it's all it does. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of platforms out there that sort of tack on an engagement survey because it's the popular thing to do these days. But to me, it's a lot like those old school ovens that had the microwave attached. And sometimes when something tries to do too many things, it doesn't do anything well. So I really like that Engagement Multiplier's only focus is engagement. And they're going to help you keep a pulse on exactly what's happening in your organization in real time, which is the why. When you have real-time feedback, when you know exactly how your organization is feeling in the moment and how they're responding to things like working from home and COVID and vaccines and the uncertainties around that and snow days and having kids at home like I just had yesterday, then you can make better decisions as a leader. And you're also not playing hunches, which is, we all know what happens when we make assumptions. You're working with real, honest data. So you're acting in the right ways and doing exacting things. So we talked a lot about efficiency. We don't have time for wasted effort in tough times. So you got to do the right thing the first time. Like we said, wellness check versus autopsy, get out ahead of that. And also I've heard that the time to kill a monster is when it's a baby. So we don't want little issues to grow into monsters. We want to find out about it when it's a little issue and we can deal with it right then. In terms of how, if you get a really good engagement survey, this should be set and forget. I mean, there's some effort on your part in dealing with the information, but this shouldn't be a whole other thing that you have to hire a part-time person to manage. Technology is amazing these days, and you can really get something that honestly does a lot of the work for you. It's automated. It should not be more than 10 minutes because we know that's a marker that we don't want to bump up against. And Engagement Multiplier allows you to send out a pulse survey once per quarter. I would say that's a minimum at times like these because there's so much change and flux going on. But you can, they also have a whole library, an extensive library that they keep adding to of what they call on-demand surveys. So, back when we were all switching to work from home, I don't know what your current circumstances is, if that's still something that your organization has available, or maybe there's a hybrid. That would have been a really good time to send out an on-demand survey and say, how's it going? Because a lot of people probably were struggling with that transition, maybe felt like they needed more support, more skills. So that combination of something regular that's happening at a minimum quarterly, and then, when you see a change, good or bad, or just something's different, then you can do that on demand, in the moment reach out. And honestly, your team's going to start to really appreciate that. Again, it's not only do you get insight that's going to help you make better decisions and be a better leader, but your team is going to get the message that you care about how they feel, you want their input, you're inviting them into a conversation, and that's so important. I will say, however, and if this is something you want to talk about beyond today, I'm happy to get into the nitty-gritties, but it is critically important that any survey you use is 100% anonymous. If you really want people to tell you the truth, they can't feel like they can be found out, even from you. And that's something that I don't get to see, you don't get to see. Engagement Multiplier does not disclose that information. You can see department trends, you can see teams, so you can see people based off of tenure. So there's ways that you can adjust the demographics and again see certain groups, but you can't say, oh, that was Emily who gave me that feedback that I'm not the best leader. So that's really important. One other thing I want to mention, actually, as I'm thinking about it, is you don't have to be a 100-person or 1,000-person company to do an engagement survey. We usually recommend having at least 10 people so we can keep that anonymity. Now, if you have 3 people, you can usually, if you're one of them, you can usually kind of figure out who's who. So keep that in mind. We might be able to judge that a little bit if you're close to 10. So let's talk. But if you're past 10, or at 10 or past 10, then this is absolutely something you should be doing, and honestly is foundational in doing business in the modern era. So I just want to give you a quick snapshot of what Engagement Multiplier looks like. Again, I can give you more details if this is really speaking to you, but there's so much information that you can grab from 10 minutes. If you can see on this right-hand side, there's an overall engagement score. We're looking for at least 80% of your organization to be engaged. There's always going to be some flux. Some of that stuff doesn't have to do with anything that you're doing in the company. Some of that is because stuff's going on in their personal life. So they're, getting 100% is frankly unrealistic. But if we're below 80%, we've got some issues. But it's really going to pinpoint trends over time. You can see amongst different groups. So in this particular instance, those people who've been in this organization for longer than 2 years are struggling more than the new folks, than the leaders and owners. So we probably need to focus more on supporting that group, helping them out, seeing what's unique about their experience that's giving them a more difficult time, staying in the game. And then it also gives you trends over time. So you can see your progress. You can see if what you're doing is working. I love that kind of real-time feedback because, none of us have time to do stuff that's not working. And this is keeping us honest about what is and what isn't. And then it gives us something to report back. So I want to give you, as part of today, an exclusive offer. This is not something we offer to clients. We really don't give anything away for free, but because you're here today, I really want to honor that. And if you just want to sort of put your toe in the water, but get tons of value back and just try this out, if you email me after today, and that's my email address, if you can't capture it quick enough, I'm sure you could get it from Brian and Kelly too. You can get access to a free benchmark engagement survey. There's no pressure obligation. It's not like you're stuck and you don't give any credit card, you're not stuck. But it's a great way to just, again, see what you think, and you actually get a number. So you also have a sense of where you land and the work that you want to be doing after that. Awesome. So now we know what we're working with, how many folks we've got in the game, and who we need to get off the bench. Now let's look at our job descriptions. I know this sounds pretty dry. Most of us don't read job descriptions for fun, but again, these are things that we really can't do once and forget about or leave there for years, because roles are ebbing and flowing. And certainly in the last year, that's happened, I'd say more so than normally. You know, the scope of what people are doing or who's doing what and what teams and leadership, that's all been adjusting by a little, or in some cases a lot. So we have to make sure that those job descriptions are right sized for what people are actually doing. I've been joking that I think there's the BC and the AC. So there's before COVID and after COVID. And, you know, I know we're all sick of talking about COVID on some level, and I get that, but we really have to recognize that there's an old reality and there's a new reality. And, you know, right now it's COVID. Next year it might be something else, and the next year it might be something else. You know, the presidential election, that had a big impact on folks. So we have to recognize that these big moments require us to go back and make sure that what we're saying we expect of our team is appropriate for the work that they're doing. Okay, so here's some questions, and if any of you want this, I'm happy to email it to you, because again, if you can't feverishly grab this or take a screenshot, I can get it to you, no problem. But really important questions to ask are, how has this role changed? And when I say ask, it's something we shouldn't assume. Really engage your team members in conversation, or if you have more folks in your organization, push these questions out to your managers so they can be asking this in the one-on-ones. Has this role been combined with another? Are all of these tasks still within the role's responsibility? Does this role require new skills or methods? Have the performance requirements or manager expectations changed? Is the reporting structure still the same? I mean, you might have had major reorgs or had to lose some folks, which causes some people to take on 1.5 roles, a lot more than what they had before. Maybe you moved responsibilities around. We need to make sure that that really is reflected in the current job description. Is the team the same? And lastly, don't forget about yourself. It's great to make sure that's right for your employees, but I have a hunch, because I'm there too, you've probably done a lot of pinch hitting in the last year. You probably have had to fill in the gaps more than normal. You might have been doing activities that were not originally part of your job description, whatever that might be. So it's important that you take an honest look at what tasks have you been overseeing? Have you been managing? And I have a feeling that that list grows over time. And it's important to take time and honestly reflect. And I actually like to do this monthly, but especially now, what can you delete? What are you doing out of habit? But really, if you stop doing it, would anyone notice? What can you delegate? A mentor of mine, Dan Sullivan, he is the creator of Strategic Coach. And he talks about, don't think about what needs to get done, but who can do it. So ask yourself who, not how or what. Automation. Brian and Kelly know I'm really big on utilizing technology wherever possible. So if you can get, especially for those routine automated tasks, if you can get a piece of technology to do it for you, awesome. But sometimes we get so busy doing the thing that we don't have time to think about, you know, what technology we can get to do it for us. So you really have to carve out that time to have this reflection and then rethink. I will speak for myself as a high achiever type, what I say AAA personality. I will get her done. And even if it doesn't always match what works well for me, each one of us has a natural way of taking action and solving problems. It's distinct from personality and skills. It's how you do things. It's your frictionless path. But as leaders, oftentimes, if it's friction, we'll endure it because it needs to get done, and we're the ones that are left to do it. But there's only so long that you can do that before you get exhausted and burned out. And if you're exhausted and burned out and unfulfilled, then you don't have any energy to lead. So think about, am I doing things in a really unnatural, uncomfortable way? Might I get to the same exact result, but rethink how I get there and my process for getting there to better match who I am and what works well for me? So it's just a reflection on, you know, maybe I did it that way in the moment because it was an emergency, but on an ongoing basis, how can I make this better match me? Okay, so we're on a roll. We've got our engagement data. We know where we stand. We have action items out of that. We've now right-sized our job descriptions for where people are in the company, what they're actually doing in a after COVID world. So now let's do what I call an efficiency analysis for each employee. Okay, so first, efficiency is a buzzword. We all love the sounds of it. Sounds great. But I'm going to give you a framework that might be a little different. So I look at efficiency almost vertically in my mind. So there's the job holder. And just like I talked about before, there's a way each and every one of us naturally operates. It's not a want. It's not something we're taught to do. It's just nature. And we know that when we fight nature, we usually lose, right? Nature wins. So there's the aspect of how is this job holder wired to operate and get results? What works best for them? Not what they can do, but really what they do best and most naturally with the least amount of friction. Then if we go up a rung, that person in the job has a perception of what that job requires of them. And that may or may not be how they naturally do things. So it's basically, what do I have to do to get the job done? And then if we go up another rung, the manager of that role has expectations about how the role is to be performed. They have understandings about what they feel that role is, what the results need to be, and how to get there. Efficiency happens when those three things are lined up, which means the person in the job understands the job clearly, that the manager and that individual are on the same page about what the job actually is, what it requires, and that person's a good match. As you can imagine, when there's deviation from that, that's where we get inefficiencies, wasted effort, and it's going to cost that person time and effort, and it's going to cost your company time and effort and productivity. So let me just give you an example. If the job holder has a good grasp of what the job is because they've been in the job for maybe 10 years, and they say, hey, I'm really good at this. This is natural for me. This is a good fit. I'm good at doing what this role requires. But maybe the manager is newly assigned and that manager has never performed the role, never been in it, so they don't have firsthand experience. Maybe the manager has recently been a part of leadership strategic planning and is really thinking very forward and has more of in her mind what she sees the role as being, not necessarily what it is today. So what happens in that instance is the manager and that individual are not on the same page, and that job holder first is going to get frustrated because she's going to feel like, I'm operating out of expectations that don't fit my current reality as she sees it. And then she's going to report something like, I have to do one set of tasks to get the job done and a whole other set of tasks just to please my manager. Well, we don't want that. That's a lot of extra work and double time, not to mention that person's going to get frustrated by this whole effort and not do it for much longer. And her engagement's going to go down, and you might even lose her as an employee. So when to kill a monster is when it's a baby. We really need to keep an eye out for this. And efficiency is hard enough to get alignment of these three things when things are in flux. When we have major events like global pandemic, it really easily gets these things out of whack. So I want to do something with all of you, have a little fun, and illustrate really what it feels like to be out of alignment and how frustrating that is. So do me a favor, grab a pen and grab a piece of paper. I can't see you doing this, but I promise it's worthwhile to do this. It's going to take us 1 minute or less. I'm going to do it with you, but what I want you to do is exactly what it says. I want you to print on this piece of paper your first name and your last name. Perfect. First name, last name. Now, switch hands. Okay, it gets harder, right? So now do the same exact thing with your opposite hand. I want you to print your first and last name. Okay, I've even had practice with this. I've done this probably hundreds of times. And I still do a horrible job the second time around. It looks like my 5-year-old did it, right? No offense to my wonderful 5-year-old, but that's my example. So I've seen worse, right? So maybe I'm getting a little bit better. But maybe you can email me your results since I can't see them. But actually, here's what we can do. Why don't you chat in the box, in the chat box, what the difference was for you? How did it feel the second time around versus the first time around? What do you feel the difference was in results the second time around versus the first time around? So go ahead and chat in the chat box if you did it and what it felt like and what those differences were. Carrie, it took longer and doesn't look pretty. Okay, who else? Come on, did you all do it? Anybody? You had to put, Megan, you had to put more thought into it. Exactly. So what I often hear in this exercise, and it's still true of me, is it took more time, more effort, way more thought, and it was a worse result. So more effort, less productivity, less quality. That's not a really good formula, right? So interestingly enough, handedness or dominant handedness is instinctual. We didn't all go to a class when we were 3 years old and they didn't, lay out the pros and cons of right hand or left hand, and we made a rational, thoughtful choice. We just gravitated towards one hand or the other, and it just came naturally to us. So that's another example of when we or our employees, because this applies to us too, are fighting that natural grain that they have to do things a certain way. No one wins. They're frustrated because work every day. I mean, you did this for 30 seconds, but work every day for them feels like writing with the wrong hand. So they're going to get burned out. You're going to have higher healthcare costs because they're going to get sick. You're going to have lower engagement, and you're also not going to get the same kind of results or quality that you expect of them. And they're going to feel so stuck, they don't even know how to get out of it. If you still don't believe me, I'm going to show you what it actually looks like in our brains when we do this. When we put people in misalignment, this is what happens. And again, nobody does that intentionally, but this happens to us. And if we don't catch it when the monster's a baby, this is what the monster grows into. So this was actually groundbreaking research in 2012 in neuroscience. This always makes me think of, if you remember, I think it was back in the 80s or early 90s when they did that commercial, "This is your brain and this is your brain on drugs." And they had the egg and then the egg in a fry pan. So this is your brain, and then this is your brain when you're forcing it to work against what comes naturally. I'm not talking about personality skills here, but really that flow, some people call it. I like calling it glide pattern. So underneath here is actually the brain scans, and essentially that red is the effort. So the good news is this brain is not white, or this person would be resting, but essentially on that left-hand side, this is an example of someone that was doing something efficiently. They were asked to do a job, in this case, a particular task that was natural for them, and that was in alignment with what they do well and what the expectations are. Everybody was clear, everybody's on the same page. That person not only felt good about the experience, but they had a really good outcome. So then they gave that same exact person a task in this instance, but again, you could think of this as being a whole job that was same level of difficulty. So it's not like we upped the stakes there, but it was just against the grain. We added friction. And you can see the brain activity. You can also see what's lighting up. It took 12 times more mental energy. And I will tell you, this is physically unsustainable. And you've probably experienced either yourself or you've seen other people. who might have even been top performers at one time, who are operating at uncharacteristically low levels of productivity. And it's because this is what their brain looks like. I've had one person say, it's like my brain's on fire. And that's really what it feels like. And what we need to understand as business leaders, the scarier thing I think out of this is that the parts of the brain that lit up. So in the left-hand side, we're using our instinctive part of the mind. It's in the occipital lobe that drives how we naturally take action. It's a really efficient place to use our effort. In the right-hand side, because things didn't come naturally, this person had to utilize other parts of their brain, namely the emotional place. So this person got frustrated and angry and annoyed and mad. So just think about the impact to the culture, to the team. I find that normally when people are operating within that right-hand side of things, they start to take people down with them. Then it becomes a toxic culture situation that ultimately emerged from, we just didn't, fight the baby or fight the monster when it was a baby, and capture the fact that we're asking them to do things in an inefficient way. So I want to show you the tools that we have to really pinpoint what's happening here and get to this quickly, because I'm very data driven, but I also don't have a lot of time. And to mention it again, assumptions really get us in trouble. So we don't want to make assumptions here. So this is an actual client. I'm actually going to go facilitate a team retreat for them on Monday, but this is an actual client happening right now. As you can see, just last month, they completed these assessments. And I know it doesn't all mean so much to you right now, but if you look at just these colors, just these graphics, you can see who Sarah is, what she thinks her job requires of her, and what her boss thinks the job is aren't the same. So just visually, we know we need to have a conversation and get everybody on the same page. This creates what we call strain and tension. So this mismatch of somebody trying to be somebody they're not, or to please the manager. So we need to come back around to what is this job? And that's why, starting with the job description is really helpful, because Sarah might be thinking the job's what it used to be back in February. Jesse might be thinking the job is what it is moving forward. So we need to cut through all that communication and get right to the heart of it very fast. And this helps us do it. The Kolbe assessments do not measure personality or skills. Almost every other assessment out there does measure those things. This is very distinctive. So while you might use other assessments or have heard of other assessments, and while I do think assessment companies got together and colluded to make it totally confusing that they'll all have 4 colors, this truly is in a league of its own. It's not data you can get anywhere else. But if you're interested in doing this in your organization, let me know. We can talk about exactly what this looks like. It's very simple to execute. And I will say, if you feel overwhelmed at the thought of doing this for everybody, start with yourself, or start with somebody who is really struggling with performance, or maybe you have a particular role that has chronic turnover. Let's go right to the tough cases. I really like starting there, and let's prove the value of this there, and we can expand it throughout your organization. Okay, we're on a roll. As you can probably tell, these strategies really build on each other. So now let's talk about revising your performance review process. Again, I think this is a great, side note, a great place to take advantage of technology. I work with lots of organizations of all different sizes, and some of them are still doing the pencil and paper annual review process. Some of them have switched to something online. I love what the options are available right now out in the marketplace. There's some really incredible and affordable platforms that make that whole process so much simpler, and make the HR professionals' hearts flutter. So you can help them out and also creating more of those things that we started out at the beginning: two-way conversation, ongoing coaching, rather than this one big moment in the year that really doesn't recognize that that's the sum of a lot of little moments along the way. So our performance review system, just like those job descriptions, probably doesn't match the current reality. So I'll mention Dan Sullivan again. He has a phrase that I live by, which is all progress starts by telling the truth. So let's tell the truth about things are different. So we need to make sure that that's reflected in what we're saying we expect of people in our organization. How would you feel if you were set up to fail from the start? If that was a foregone conclusion, my guess is y'all would disengage and you probably would just not even try. This is what it feels like when you have set expectations for your team members that are unrealistic. And that might have happened by accident if you're still operating with the before COVID expectations. So again, have these coaching conversations or empower your managers to have these conversations, invite two-way conversation, go back to your team members and ask, how has your ability to perform changed? You know, they might say, I'm home with my kids, and that's very real for me. I have a 7-5-year-old. Thankfully, they go to Hillcrest, so they're in school. But I get that as a parent of young kids, that's been a real struggle for me. And we need to be sensitive to that and help our team members solve for that. Because it's a reality whether we recognize it or not. What obstacles do you face now that you didn't face before? They might be working from home and not have access to the same kind of technology or space than they did at the office. I love talking about new opportunities. For some people, virtual work has created more freedom, more energy, more efficiency. Maybe they see ways that their roles could expand so they could create more value for the organization. So that's a great question to ask too. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. And of course, do the expectations we set back when, whatever that date is, match today? Do you feel set up for success or do you feel set up for failure? Because if it's the latter, that person's going to check out on you. Usually performance review processes or frameworks address goals and competencies. So goals might be, increase sales by 10%, and competencies might be detail oriented, organizational, structured, things like that. So make sure, if you need a framework for how to think about revising these expectations for them or having these conversations, think about what were the goals that we set and how do those need to adjust, and what are the competencies for this role? A lot of the work we had before, because the whole context and even the actual environment, again, work from home or work from the office, was very different from what it is today. And we can't take those for granted. So maybe they need new competencies. Maybe being a great presenter on Zoom is a competency that we never thought to add before, but is actually now critical of that job role. So we need to be clear about that, because what's going to come from that is you might find that people now have skills gaps. So they weren't hired under the expectation that they need to be good Zoom presenters. Now it's a core part of their job. And by recognizing that, you might realize, okay, we need to give you some training on this. We need to give you more resources so you can do your job really well. And this process, these conversations are going to illuminate that. Again, don't forget about yourself. Because you're a leader, or maybe the business owner, our performance evaluation is how the business is doing. So that's very sobering, right? But have you taken the time to think about how your 5-year vision needs to adjust given what's happening in the world? Have you right-sized your 1-year projections? Now, thankfully, we just started a new year. Hopefully you had the time to think these things through. But really challenge yourself to think, are you setting your own self up for failure? Are you creating expectations for yourself that are unfair and unrealistic? Think very honestly about your clients and the overall marketplace. Is it what it was before? How have things changed? How might that impact your goals, your competencies, and even down to your core value offering? Maybe what you did for people before all of this is not as valuable to them now. So how can you meet them where they are in this moment and adapt with the changing environment to be just as relevant now as you were before? Okay, we're on number 5. Well done. We're on the home stretch. And this one is to rethink your hiring strategy. As I said before, it doesn't matter where you are in hiring. If you can't imagine when you're going to be freed up to hire another person, or if you can't hire fast enough, or somewhere in between, you still need to have a well-constructed hiring strategy. The worst thing you can do is, as they say, hire warm bodies, right? We don't want to get into that, because then we create all the problems that we just resolved in the last 4 strategies. So we want to do it well, but doing it well doesn't have to mean it takes a lot of time or is hard, especially if you have the right kinds of tools and insight. So here are the 3 things that you want to be thinking about. First, identify gaps. This is a great opportunity to do if you're not hiring at the moment, because you have the time to step back and look at your organization. Where's the gap between where you are today and that revised 5-year vision you have? What talent don't you have today that you're going to need to get you there? Where are there gaps on your leadership team? Where are there gaps in your management team? Where are there gaps in different departments? Really zoom out and think through not just who you have today, but who's going to take you to tomorrow. Seize the opportunity. It sounds counterintuitive, but this is really the best time to pick up top talent. As part of the work that I do, I coach people who are in job transition, and I'll tell you, you have a lot of the control and power in this situation. There are really good top performers out there that you frankly may not have had an opportunity to attract their attention before now, but because so much is up in the air, and they may have gotten laid off to no fault of their own, or maybe they're just, their company hasn't done all of these strategies and they're disengaged and they're frustrated. They don't feel like they have fulfilling work. This is a good opportunity to grab them and pull them in. So keep your eyes and ears open for those people that are really high quality. Oftentimes in tough times, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So keep that in mind. When you see that, be ready to make them a great offer, one that they can't refuse, bring them on your team, and get ready no matter what. Someday at some point, this is all going to be behind us. We won't have to wear masks anymore, right? We're going to be in a new place. And if you're not ready to jump the moment that happens, you're going to be stuck at the start line. Everybody's going to be way past you. And in hiring, this is a competitive sport. So you got to be ready the minute that gun fires and you're ready to go. And that might be that your organization's ready, or it might be just that the world is sort of ready to really recharge and move forward fast paced. I think that's already happening and has been happening, but you just can't sort of sit back on your laurels on this. Okay, so again, we help organizations just like yours, and they can be thousands of persons, international companies. We've certainly worked with them. They can be 3-person small businesses. We've certainly worked with them. And everybody has the same issue, which is the fear of hiring the wrong person and how painful and expensive that is. There's a lot of assessments out there. I will tell you, not all assessments are created equal, and you really have to do the legwork, look under the hood, make sure you know what you're getting. We do that on behalf of our clients. That's why, for the purposes of hiring, we use the Kolbe system, because it is the most, and I can say this with certainty, valid and reliable measure as to who will work well. I'm happy to have a separate conversation outside of today as to why that's the case. But what's helpful for you is that you get concrete terms and language and measures for who will work well. It takes the guesswork out of this process. It doesn't derail or override what you're currently doing. This isn't the only piece of the hiring puzzle, but this is a critical piece. It's objective, and it makes your decision-making so much easier because it's not all on you. We actually create candidate grades from A+ to F. And I love that it feels dummy proof, and it allows you to really confirm the thinking that you've already had about a person, or keep you from committing a major error by bringing someone on board who is going to be writing with the wrong hand, essentially, right? Who's going to have the brain on fire. We certainly don't want to have that happen. So let's kill the monster when it's a baby. Okay, so thank you for the whirlwind tour. I know that was a lot, but hopefully you got some really great golden nuggets out of each and every one of those. I hope you found something that you can apply today, right now. Start small. Again, if it's overwhelming to think of doing this across the board, there's no reason that you have to. Start with your problem area, or maybe with yourself, and then, you know, lead by example in that way. But some things that I encourage you to do moving forward, please connect with me on LinkedIn. For those of you that are already friends with me there, I put out lots of content, and it's valuable stuff. I really try to give a lot of how-tos and step-by-steps and frameworks, and not only on my personal page at Emily Emilius, but also on Launch Consulting, which is going to be, you know, really that heavier business leadership kind of stuff. If you want that free benchmark survey, that sounds really interesting to you, email me, happy to give you the next steps for that. And if you want to go deeper on anything that we talked about today, or get some more understanding of what this could look like for you in your organization, then go to the website, launchconsulting.io, and schedule a discovery call. It's 30 minutes, just a time for us to talk. You know, I want to understand your vision, what's getting in the way, and then we can talk about if it makes sense to work together, what that would look like, all the ins and outs. So feel free to do that. Those aren't any obligation, just a chance to go a little bit deeper, and we can, you know, connect one-on-one. There's one other thing I want to mention before I open it up to Q&A. I want to give all of you an exclusive invitation. I am so excited because in April, we are launching a membership program called the Fulfillment Factor. Just like I opened today, fulfilled employees are top performers, and really that starts with you. If you are unfulfilled and unsatisfied as a leader, you don't have energy to lead. And it's critical for you, your own longevity in your career, and your success in your leadership role, to make sure that you really are energized and satisfied and fulfilled in your work. So this is a new program offering that we have. There's 2 live trainings a month, on-demand content. Maybe the most valuable is the fact that it's a community of folks just like you, like-minded, where you can bounce ideas off of each other. They're not in your organization, which really helps. So you can get that outside perspective. Strengths and job fit assessments, so the things we talked about here. And I have a Founders Club offer. So the first 15 people are getting extra bonuses. They're getting extra pricing. And you're amongst the first to hear about this. So I'm sure that's going to fill up fast, but you might be able to get your spot. So if that's really interesting, let me know, and we can talk about the details of that. Would love to have you there and be a contributor to that community. And with that, I welcome any feedback, any questions, any ahas. You know, I love to hear what resonated with you out of today, but I'll open up the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. I do have one question back to the right fit. So the right fit, when it said the service person, are those already, you can pick from what kind of position you're filling, and those are already developed, or do you have to develop all that from yourself?
So those are reports that come out of a process that we go through. It's called the Right Fit Program. And I'll contrast it first, that most hiring assessments only look at 2 things. They look at the candidate and they look at the role itself, which are important things to look at, of course. That's the first match that we have to get right. And by the way, to be EEOC compliant, assessments have to do both of those things. Some people use like a DISC, for example, in hiring, which is not EEOC compliant because it only measures the candidate. It doesn't measure the role. So a fun fact, there's over 800 assessments out there, and only a handful of them are EEOC compliant. So you don't want to, I think we have some attorneys on the call today, you certainly don't want to accidentally get yourself into legal hot water by using the wrong assessment in hiring. So happy to talk you through that. And actually a plug for what's upcoming next week, I'm talking about how to hire top performers. And a big part of that is how to utilize assessments well and correctly in that process. But first, make sure it's EEOC compliant. But then of those handful of assessments, some only look at that one dimension. So does this candidate match what we're looking for? And even at that, a lot of them are looking at personality factors, which aren't actually predictive of job fit. For example, Predictive Index, which has predictive in the name, is only 19% accurate. So let that sink in. 19% accurate in predicting who will work well. The tools we use are 82% accurate. So 19%, 82% accurate. But we look at the valid measures, but then also, Brian, what we do is we look at the direct manager, because as we looked, efficiency, right, requires a relationship not only to that person in the job role, but that person and the manager. And I'm not aware of another assessment process that factors that in. So we also get the MO of that manager, how they naturally operate and their expectations for the position. And those things come together. So it's a very sophisticated process, but it's all happening in the back end. So it's not, not something we have to come up with. And that produces what we call a range of success. So here's the type of candidates that will succeed in this role with this manager. And again, that extra layer of with this manager, I think is one of the key factors of 19% to 82% efficacy difference. But those reports, if I'm answering your question well, Brian, are what come out of that. So I didn't, for the purposes of today, I didn't show all the reports that we have, but it's going to give you very concrete language that the person you're looking for will do these things. The person that you're looking for won't do these things. So that's language that you don't have to sit down and write. It's actually something that the process gives you, but it's great because you can grab that for those job descriptions or the job postings. And you're certain that you're going to be attracting the right kind of people. Did that answer your question, Brian?
You bet. Thanks.
Okay. And then some.
If anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask through the Q&A. I just have a couple notes. Wow. What I like about a webinar is when I have, or any discussion is when I have an immediate impact, and the who's on the bench and who's in the game will live on, because that is a great analogy that makes it easy for us. And I think, to be honest with you, the analogies, and you made several of them. The other one was, how's your significant other gonna like you if you only ask them how they feel once a year. So those are things we can all relate to. So you don't ever have to worry about any technical mumbo jumbo, but those kinds of things are awesome. And then of course the autopsy versus the wellness check, all those cute little, phrases there are very good. I do want to thank you for the offer on the free benchmark for everyone, and for offering the slides to everyone. And to add to that, like I mentioned at the beginning, we will have a link to this webinar on our YouTube page, and we'll send that out to you when we're done. So because the point I want to make there is, obviously you guys are a lot smarter than I am, so that are here. But if you didn't get all of it, because I know I didn't, I got some immediate stuff that I was just like blown away with. But go ahead and go back to the slides and go back to the YouTube, and you just don't have to figure it all out once, because better than anyone, Emily, that it's going to take a few times to figure out the steps. Just like you said, do a little by little, and I think that's the best way to approach this. Would you agree, Emily?
Sure. Well, and you don't have to do it alone. I wanted to equip you with things that you can act on today, but this is what I'm here for. I get a thrill out of this stuff, which I know for a lot of you, it might feel like a necessary evil, but there are tools, there are people that can absolutely come alongside you and help you through this. And, you really don't have to go it alone. And Carrie, awesome. Okay. I'm seeing Carrie talk about how relevant this is. Again, these are things, it's not just you. I think, the saying misery loves company. It feels good to know that a lot of people are struggling with all the same things. And it's really hard to even keep up with how much things are changing. So you're not alone. But Carrie, it sounds like for you especially, let's talk about that efficiency analysis, because honestly, I can't imagine trying to do this without the use of assessments. First of all, just the subjectivity and the time frame. And by the time you gathered the insights, it would have changed again. So that's really the value of getting the right kind of data, good data in, good decisions out.
Good. Well, thanks, Emily. We really appreciate it. As Emily mentioned, we actually have 2 more sessions. Next Wednesday is how to hire top talent. And then the following Wednesday on the 24th is how to diagnose and solve people problems. So please feel free to register if you have not already done so. It is that time, so I just want to add a couple other things. If you would like to register, you can do so and look at all of our other events at www.ptcoc.org. And also feel free to take a look at our LinkedIn page and link in and follow us, and also our Facebook group, PT Chamber Community Support.